Guys, good morning. How are we all doing on this Sunday morning? I know that it's a little off schedule because I had to work yesterday and I got a lot of stuff done, so I'm feeling pretty productive. So let's just jump in here and let's talk. Oh, it's beautiful. And now I wanted to talk this morning specifically. Sorry, I went like 2 minutes. I usually go live 5 minutes before, but I had to do my whole wake up routine on a Sunday, shower, shave, all that fun jazz to make sure that you get to see this all tidy and clean and specifically good. Um, so before we jump into last week's games on the OLL, Mud Turtle, good morning. Before we jump into that, guys, there was a huge news drop on the 11th about their massive changes that they're doing towards buff removal. Towards buff removal, and I think that's awesome. Give me one sec. I want to make sure I'm sharing all this stuff in the right spots. I think I did actually, Mud. I posted it in the live streams channel. Yeah. So perfect. We are all good, set, squared away. Like I said, I was a little rushed. I only had 2 minutes of prep time, so I didn't get to hey, post it to Twitter, post it to Facebook, all this stuff, so people would come and see me. Man, I gotta get a new camera. I'm investing in a lot of nice, hopefully new, better equipment for this. But it's down the road. We'll do what we have. Today I wanted to talk about. Is that it? No, it's this. This stuff right here. Wranglothor, good morning. Cassilia, good morning as well. So, many of you guys obviously heard. You obviously have heard about. Oh my, what's happening over here? Notifications all day, every day. All right, cool. Um, but yeah, guys, they are making a huge change to buff removal. And I'll probably, all of you have read this by now, right? All of you understand the new keyword restricted has in play. They changed what these cards are going to initially do. And everyone's been talking about them on the forums, like, hey, I think this is really cool. There was one really good insight that someone posted about Reckless Spirit that I wanted to, it's probably like way up there. So I will not be able to, unfortunately, read it verbatim, but I did want to basically touch on what he said as well. No problem, Rangathor. No problem. Make sure to catch the replay and leave comments. I'll be trying to catch up on my YouTube posting after the video today. I'll get last week's and this week's up on YouTube, so feel free to watch them there, post comments, do whatever you feel you need to do to watch and get your content in for the week. OFC, good morning. Thank you for sending me your deck list today, by the way, so I can actually look at them while I'm commenting. It's going to be awesome. But yeah, I wanted to touch on this a few things. Obviously, there's a lot of discussion, so there isn't a whole lot I need to repeat, as everyone has been fully well aware that the changes to buff removal has gone. And it's a really good reason they're doing this is to make so that there isn't just heavy, massive control decks out there. So for stall, essentially, who just play 3 Pathfinders, 3 Crystal Leashes, 3 Shadow Puppets when you include all that. All of the burn now has a card called Restricted, which means you can't have more than 3 copies of a buff removal in your deck that's like that. You can have the family-specific buff removals as well. You can have the unaligned loot snatchers as well. So you can have quite a bit of buff removal, but the other ones are more restricted. Yes, and the Ancient, of course. El Meteor Bolos, thank you very much for the follow. I appreciate it, man. Thank you. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff. Obviously, yes, the Ancient is more buff removal as well. But it really starts narrowing down how heavy install can be with buff removal. And they did it by basically changing, obviously with the keyword restriction, and then they changed it so they're not all the same. They're not all like, what am I trying to say? They're not all just like, hey, remove 2. They're all starting to feel a little more unique, which is, first of all, awesome. I really like the fact that they're all starting to feel very unique, and they're all starting to feel very much so like they belong to that specific order or alignment, so that Shadow Puppet, Crystal Leech, and Shadow Puppet and Crystal Leech didn't just say remove 2 buffs. They're starting to feel a little bit more specific. Now, I do want to talk about how I'm kind of trying to understand where they're coming from this. It's still trying to keep everything very even, very around that 2.5 cost for an action is what they're mathematically proven to do. So Crystal Leech heals your target for 2. Hammer Down Enforcer deals 2 damage to you. Reckless Spirit. Now, Reckless Spirit is something along the lines where I'm like, ooh, that's really dangerous. Because obviously, yes, you get to remove 2, but then your opponent literally draws a card. And that was fine in the past for cards like Looper, where, you dealt 6 damage to your opponent, they drew a card. Because you were killing them so fast that their card draw didn't matter as much. But Nature, in the hindsight, in the development process, Nature has always had that kind of thing where, like Ashwood Diva, I'll draw 3 cards, you draw 2 cards. They've kind of gone back and forth to go along with that. And yes, obviously great with Roaming Zombie. So there's a lot of really cool synergies you can do with Reckless Spirit. It feels very out of the ordinary. It kind of counterbalances with Shadow Puppet, where you get to discard a card from your deck. Now, obviously, it not being from your hand means there's a lot less control over it. There's a lot more randomness, where it's not like, oh, I'll save Shadow Puppet to discard this card to get a really good synergy. Shadow Puppet, you could discard a combo. Like, that could be really, really potentially dangerous. Thunder Slug, they narrowed it down for a 1-1. Now, Thunder Slug, back down to this, in my opinion now, I feel like Thunder Slug might potentially be the worst one of them all, next to Reckless Spirit because of the drawback. But Thunder Slug is a buff within itself still. There are a lot of card synergies that are used to obviously rotate beast buffs forward. There are a lot of things that will rotate buffs forward. So there's a lot of ways to manipulate Thunder Slug to get really good value. But on its own, without any other card outside manipulation, you need to last for 2 turns. It is, yet again, one of those things where it's a deterrent, where if your opponent can't remove Thunder Slug, they don't want to lay anything into it for it to get removed. So it's one of those like counterbalances where there's advantages and there are disadvantages to it along the same thing. But where every single other one is almost a guaranteed 2 under your control, Thunder Slug without a multiple card synergy it's a risk. You might only be able to remove 1. So I feel like Storm in itself is either going to start now becoming less it's gonna do 2 things. It's gonna become more hyper aggro, more than it was actually before, or its deck constructions are gonna be starting to a little limit towards like, hey, if you run Thunder Slug, you're gonna want to run that 1 elemental that spins a beast buff forward by 1, and you're gonna save those 2 card combos for laying Thunder Slug and then spinning it forward, or you're gonna start playing more refined or more kind of tunneled decks to play Thunder Slug in, so that if you want to play control, you got to have some other cards along with it to then balance it out. And it's not going to be as much diverse in its deck building process. Puppet should maybe be from hand. I don't think so, because then all you have to do is just dump your hand, and then Shadow Puppet's a free 2. Really easy to do. People would splash that into aggro. It has to be something where you are always going to have a drawback to it. And this is kind of what I want to talk to. A few things, actually. One of them being, I've always been a fan of conditional increases as opposed to potential drawbacks over cards like this. Because as we all look at this, we all look at like, oh, Pathfinder, remove 2 buffs, but while this is on top, you can't attack. Okay, let's work around that. We'll put a Pathfinder there, and then next turn we'll just put a defend, or we'll have a buff rotate out or something to then allow us to attack again. Like it really goes into deck construction and how smart you are at building your deck and all the synergies. So it's not bad that stuff like this. It's just like one of those things where when you put a card in, you have to go, okay, how can I avoid the drawback? And then you just start adding some cards, and it once again kind of refines the deck itself before you even start really building it. You have the meat and the grit of how some cards should work together before you really start refining your deck. Shadow Puppet's the same thing. If you remove 2, you discard the top card of your deck. It could be a combo. It could be something really important that you've been waiting for. So it's a high risk, like not even that high of a reward type of thing. Crystal Leech and Hammer Down Enforcer, I think, are going to be the best too, because it's like, yeah, it's 2 healing. You could run cards in this where like, hey, you have a Magmorum out. Okay, cool. Magmorum's on a second corner. I'll heal you for 2. Oh, look at that. You don't heal. Sorry, but I still remove 2 of your buffs. Hammer Down Enforcer, you have a Ramparts up. I'll remove 2. I'll prevent that damage. Like, there's not a whole lot of ways outside of running, like, also including a, what's the Draga Looter? The one that's like, you can't discard cards the next 3 turns, like, along with a Shadow Puppet to kind of work around that. Reckless Spirit, I don't think there's one that makes your opponent prevent from drawing. I don't think there's a card that does that prevents them from drawing. So Reckless Spirit, like, there's no card out there right now that kind of stops them or prevents them from doing that if you have something else on the board. However, Raging River. I think Raging River only limits them to drawing 1 per turn. So they'll still draw because it's your turn, from what I'm understanding. So there's a lot of things that can easily be worked around with these cards, with just another card or 2. And then once again, having those cards in the deck really means like, hey, if you're running Crystal Leech, you're probably running like Magma Worms, or you're probably running the Creeble Saboteur, prevents from healing. Like, there's a lot of ways to counter back the balance depending on what kind of deck you're running. Now, as I've said, a lot of people have talked about this stuff, where Hammer Down Enforcer didn't change, but all the other buff removal did, and they're changing a little more thematically and a little more towards their alignment, which is awesome. Like, it's great to see. But what I'm more happy about is this little word here is restricted. They're adding an entirely new keyword to the cards, to the game itself, which means their card pool can be vastly opened up. And what I mean by this is that if all generic buff removal is starting to be restricted, they can start making more buff removal in different ways to then fit certain thematic decks. And a great one that I was trying to just off the top of my head, Shadow Puppet, now that it removes a card from the top of your deck, that would work really well in what Dread is trying to do right now with its whole discard mechanic. Discard these cards. As discarded, it does an additional effect. Like, there's really a lot of cool, fun synergies that now Shadow Puppet could fit into. You can make a card now, and even have one for like each alignment. Put a new one in Death that says remove a buff. You can remove another one if you have 5 or more undead buffs in your discard pile. That's another buff removal with a conditional increase. Like, there's something to do with that. You can put something in Lunar. Access Deny, welcome. That's like remove a buff. You get to remove an additional one if the top card of your deck or top card of your discard pile is not Astral. Something like that, where it's and because of course it's restricted, you can add that into another deck specifically, or you can start running more on aligned stuff. It works really well for that card synergistic. There's a lot of cool things they can do now in opening up buff removal just because they added a new keyword, which means the orders can have a lot more variety on how buff removal works without it being like family specific, with like Blast Spot removing locations and the Umbron the Beast Catcher or whatever from Dread removes 2 beast buffs. They can start doing a lot more of that those things. Like Reckless Spirit, if you go into no, Soul is really the one where if you have more buffs. What does Animal do well? There might be one. Uh, actually, no. I was thinking about the 7 of cards or more, like Feasting Skeetos has. Um, I'll have to start thinking about stuff like that. But Hammer Down Enforcer, you can make a card for Explosive. That's remove 1 buff. Then if you remove one of your buffs from play, you get to remove an additional one from theirs. That can be an explosive one to go along with Tech's theme, where they want to remove their own buffs to do something additionally increasing. There can be a whole lot of really cool cards made now that are buff removal, that are control, simply because you can make Crazed Bomber. You could, simply because of the restricted keyword. It opens up a vast variety of card pool, and then you can start putting them into different alignments. Meaning that, hey, you can't run 3 Hammer Down Enforcers and 3 Crazed Bombers. Yes, they're from different alignments, but because of the keyword restricted, you can only have a total of 3 in your deck. So it's like, which ones would you want to choose? If you're running a very hyper aggro, maybe you want to include the Hammer Down Enforcer. It doesn't rely on a buff board. If you're running a very heavy buff board, and a lot of the stuff you're trying to work with is very thematic on removing your own buffs to toss them in your opponent's face or something like that, yeah, why not run this buff? It's going to be really fun to do. It really works. You don't have the additional 2 damage. Maybe you run still 1 Hammer Down Enforcer in case you don't have a board. There's a lot of cool things that they can start opening up to just the game itself, and it's all because they're making new keywords, new card concepts, and all this amazingly fun stuff that I'm really happy to see about that. And I'll honestly, like, I started looking at this, and everyone's like, yeah, I don't like Shadow Puppet. It's top card. It works. Reckless Spirit. Your opponent draws a card, like it potentially could lose you the game. You control the board, but then they draw a Spark Wisp, and you're dead. Like, there's a lot of things with these drawbacks. And I'm sitting here like, okay, but with this restricted keyword, they have the potential to make a vast variety of buff removal now. And just really start opening up the game and start opening up deck designs so that now every deck doesn't have 3 Shadow Puppets. Every deck doesn't have 3 Crystal Leeches. You can run a different type of buff removal in your deck and really start mixing up the meta and mixing up deck construction and opening up a variety of deck archetypes to be really fun and very well built. So I'm crossing my fingers that PlayFusion is working on that down the line. But yeah, I'm super excited for it. I'm very much excited for it, and I cannot wait to see what other news they have coming out next week. If they have more news, that'll be awesome. But yeah, and they also said that the combos that remove buffs have also now been degraded, so it's now a finite number. So it's not like, hey, you had 14 buffs on the board, black hole, cool. There goes half your deck. Black hole is now burn. Devour Soul heals for a little less. Rock Melter is burn. Cold Snap has burn. A lot of things that have buff removal now have burn, so that it's more incentive to be like, hey, if I do run buffs in my deck, my opponent isn't just going to vastly get all these buff removal things back and just destroy me with it. So I think that's awesome that they're making it to more incentivize you to run buffs, as there is less ways for your opponent to have a vast amount of board control, so the buffs don't feel that bad. And that's awesome to see. That is fantastic to see in this game. And I think that's a great step in the right direction of changing the game for the better. Changing the game for the vast variety of cards to then be made, be opened up, and all that stuff. So I just wanted to give my 2 cents on that. Yeah, there are a few of these cards that I'm like, they're okay. There's some that like don't really seem to fit. There's some that seem really easy to work around, and some that like, oh my god, if I give my opponent a card, I could just die next turn. Where they're a little bad back and forth. But I just wanted to put my voice out there and say I'm more happy about the restricted keyword, that because this one keyword is out, a vast more variety of buff removal can now be made and put into the game without the fret of your opponent just building a deck of 20 buff removals and making you never want to play buffs again. So I'm really happy about that. That is what I'm excited for, and I hope you're excited for that too. I don't think I've ever returned Black Hole, but whatever. I mean, you might not have. You might not have. I don't think a lot of people have returned Black Hole. You could, though. Let me go back, read some of this stuff. Access denied, welcome, of course. I mean, the burn for a lot of things. I'm sorry, my face is getting blown out. It's the sun is up, so I do apologize. Burn on a lot of these cards is, I think, going to be the future. If it's removal, if it's control, the thought is that it's probably going to have burn, so that once again, because of the limited construction, there's not a lot of ways to continuously get buff removal back, and just control your opponent's board. If you want to be control, you're going to have specific buff removal, which is why I really loved the card Loot Snatcher. It was a conditional buff removal that you could add into the deck. And now with the restricted keyword, I think Loot Snatcher is going to see probably a decent amount of play now. A lot of people are going to be playing buffs and say, hey, once you reach that four buff limit, boom, Loot Snatcher comes out. And you're like, oh my god, I forgot about that card entirely. I think Loot Snatcher is going to have a surge in play now that restricted is in play as well. There's so many things that are changing in this game, and in my opinion, it's for the better. In my very strong opinion, all these changes are leaning towards a better play for the game itself, strictly because the more you start kind of refining cards and narrowing them down of specifics of what they can do, the more stricter the cards are, the vast variety of card pool you can open up to yourself and the players. And you can then use that to build several different archetypes without having every deck use the same 10 cards, because those 10 cards is so generic. As we've all talked about, I think the 5 or the 6 that we're hoping to, I guess 5 because I don't know, the cards that we're hoping to we see change next are cards like Spark Wisp, Flame Bat, Spectral, or not Spectral Mantix, the Mantix from Dread, the Mantix Spitter, the just generic 5 damage cards, and the 6 healing cards. Like those ones, I hope we see a next change to the cards as well, because they're just vastly core cards that are just really good to run. I mean, it's 5 damage. There's no reason not to run them, but they're very similar across the board, and they don't have the impact or the thematic playstyle of each alignment that they really need to start getting into if they want to start making these alignments feel less generic. Kind of like what they're doing with Shadow Puppet and Crystal Leech. So they're no longer the same card. They have conditional effects that can be used to increase them, but they're very much, they fit the theme of what their alignment does. What are we talking about now? I saw my name pop up. You and TS get to battle? Ooh, you have fun with that. You have fun with that. But yeah, I just wanted to give my 2 cents that I'm more happy about the restricted keyword than I am about the buff changes, because I feel like once we see more buffs being produced for each alignment, which, like I said, I hope is what they're going to eventually do now that they have this new keyword, that people will look at Reckless Spirit and be like, okay, no, Reckless Spirit's a fine card now, because I can either choose to use Reckless Spirit, or I can choose to use another buff removal that they came out for nature that better fits the theme of the deck that I'm trying to run. Hey, if I want my opponent to start drawing cards like with Roaming Zombie, yeah, Reckless Spirit's awesome. Yeah, I'll start running Ashwood Diva. All these things that like make my opponent draw cards. Feasting Skeetos, awesome. I can really start fitting this theme of nature. Hey, I don't want my opponent to draw cards. I'll use this one instead. There's a lot of different things that they can start doing to really fit certain archetypes that they've been trying to build in the game itself that just haven't really worked because all the cards are so generic. And with so much generic, it's just like, well, what's the best way to use these 30 cards without getting too fancy? So that's what I'm hoping for, is the restricted keyword really opens the door for creativity, which I think is one of the things. I think it was like way back. I think it was even before Uprising came out with Kindred. Is one of the things that I had commented on, and I'm not saying I told anyone this. I probably said it on stream. Is that what they should do? Is they should start putting a limited on some of these cards to really open it up. And it came out. I think it came out with their whole classical deck build. Is that they put restrictions on only one copy of a card to in the deck for classic, so that people weren't just always using all these amazing legacy cards. And I really liked that because it really opened up deck construction. It limited the card pool that you were allowed to use, and it really opened up a really cool variety of decks that were coming out of Classic. And I said they should implement that into the future of the game. Something like a limit on like certain cards you could put in. You can only have one copy of this card, like a Legendary in Hearthstone, something like that. And now essentially they're doing that with the restricted card. You can only have 3 restricted cards in a deck. And that simply did it. That did it. It limited how much of a certain card you can have in the deck, and it's going to vastly open up the deck construction, which I am super excited for. Super excited for. So, PlayFusion, hats off to you. Thunderfin salute all the way. Great idea with the restricted. I hope we see a lot more of this in the future. A lot more fun keywords being added in, not just using the family archetypes. Not obviously building your own archetypes like the new discard for Dread and all this other things, but I really hope we get to see new keywords, new game mechanics coming in the future that really open up the game and start producing a variety and vast way to play. It's going to be awesome, and I think that's amazing to see. Now, did everyone share their decks? Is that why I'm getting so many? It is. Okay, yeah. Cool. Thank you guys. Thank you guys very much for sharing your decks with me. So that when I do these commentaries, everything goes well. Now, can anyone help me here? Where did we leave off? Where did we leave off last week during the stream? H-Man and Cassilia? Okay. So, Access Deny on September 7th. That one we haven't seen yet? Thank you, TS. Thank you. Okay. Trying to think. Access Deny. I know you're here because I saw you post. You posted one, and then you posted another one on the 11th. Are they against the same opponent, or are they like week 3 and then now we're on to week 4? Oh yes, Cassilia, thank you very much for reminding me. I can't believe I forgot. I literally just posted something on it this morning. Next week, Saturday. Mark your calendars. Get everyone super excited. Me and Cassilia are going to be interviewing Benny on Saturday. And, it's from the window. There's a little light streak here because the blinds. It's really weird. Try to ignore that. Me and Cassilia actually 100% put this together. Thunderfin salute and chat for her if you can. Give her some major credit for this. She approached me one day and was like, "Hey, I've been talking back and forth with Benny about this, and I asked him if he'd be interested in doing the Q&A." And I was like, "Dude, that sounds awesome." And then she's like, "Yeah, we discussed having it on your stream." And I was like, "You what?" I felt very, very honored and very proud that I was even brought up in conversation with those two. And they're like, "Yeah, so would you be interested in having a Q&A with Benny?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course I would." So next week, Saturday at 8 a.m., obviously we'll probably do a little more of an intro talk. Probably get started at 8:15, something like that. Benny will be on the Razor Greshu show. So if you guys have any questions that you would like me to ask Benny, because it will be more of an interview case, I will unfortunately not be like reading chat religiously as I try and do during my stream, which is where Cassilia has offered her services to kind of help me monitorize chat if she has any questions, or if anyone asks questions in chat and she feels them pretty relevant. we're gonna set some up probably just through Discord, where Discord will be on one monitor, and she can then like, hey, such and such person asked this question. She'll type it out in a little more, I guess, like, I don't know, maybe even word for word. She'll type that question to me, and I'm like, hey, we just have a question from so and so, and she'll kind of pick them out of the Twitch chat, because Twitch chat will be I'm assuming is what will happen, and they'll kind of be picked out. Oh, okay. And that she'll kind of pick them out and feed them to me one at a time, so they're not getting constantly lost in chat while I actually talk with Benny and have a show with him, have a good conversation as well. And yeah, he'll be on, and he said he's really no time limit. He just has to eat lunch at some time, so we might have him on for like 2 hours, which will be awesome. To just talk with Benny, get some insight of Lightseekers. Ask him a bunch of questions. Ask him a bunch of your questions as well. So make sure to send those in to either me or Casilia. We're making a document right now on the Google Drive of all the questions that we want to make sure we ask Benny that come from specific people, or some that we've thought on ourselves. So if you want your voice to be heard, please reach out to one of us and make sure that you type those questions like, hey, I would love to ask Benny this. Now, obviously, I want to make sure everyone is fully aware of this. There is a thing called red tape. So a lot of these questions that we try to ask and we want to ask, we may not get answers for, because he's just not allowed to say stuff like this. So please don't feel offended if like we ask him questions like, I can't say anything about that. It just comes with the territory of his job. He can't give all answers at all times. He does have to and is required to keep back some of the information until it goes live, to then talk about it. So we can't be like, hey, what's your favorite hero from the new set? And he's like, well, it's not released yet. I can't say the name. I can't give everyone what to do. There's stuff like that, like, a lot of internal workings that he may not be able to talk about. So keep that in mind when asking these questions and typing them to us, that if they are very narrowed or very, like, penetrating into the business, he may not be able to answer it. So it may be a question that we just gloss over and get into some of the more of the ones where Benny can actually talk back with me about. So just keep that in mind and look forward to that next week. I'll try and do as many reminders on Facebook, on Twitter, on Discord, on all that fun stuff, that Benny and me will be going live, and it'll be great. Great to have Benji on. Now, without further ado, Access Deny. Who was your opponent? Does anyone know what his opponent was? Yeah, Mud Turtle, I definitely will. I'll ask Ben. It's like, hey, if you got time to stick around, do you want to comment on some of these games? U-Gamer, okay. Does he post videos? I'm not sure if he does. I'm not entirely sure if he does post videos, so it may just be from your perspective that we comment on this game. He does not. Okay, good to know. So yeah, we're going from September 7th. We have Access Deny, we have Mud Turtle, then Access Deny again. Looks like you're from week 4. We're on week 4, right? If I'm not mistaken, that was week 3. We may actually come back to that one, because I do see that TS and Fatal Zeph have posted their week 3 matches. Rocket Czar and OFC have posted their week 3 matches. And a bunch of other things. So we'll try and do week 3, and then we'll go into week 4. Oh, do you have... So is your video that you posted on the 11th also from week 3? Is that like your second game of the series? Because I want to make sure I'm doing these in week 3, and then we go into week 4. One is week 3, the other is week 4. Okay. Okay, yeah, because I see on the 11th you have another video. So that's week 4. We will probably jump to that last. Week 4 is Siepe. Awesome. Good to know. All right. So, guys. let's take a 5-second break for video editing purposes. Then we'll jump into OLL, because I feel like the discussion needs to be heard by a lot of people. And if I just put it up in a micro video, it'd be great. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.